This video is brought to you by Ridge. Stick around to hear more about the best wallet in the industry and the discount that they are offering to the entire upper echelon community. Okay, today we have to discuss Mass Effect, Polygon, Space Police, Camden, New Jersey, Kotaku, and the GDC. That might seem like a ridiculous list of topics for a single video, but hopefully everything will make sense pretty quick. To start with, we have to look at Mass Effect and Polygon. Polygon is not exactly known for their industry-defining coverage. In a world where certain journalistic names have an actual measurable effect on various companies, love him or hate him, Jason Schreier comes to mind for that, Polygon is not a name that will jump off the page as being prominent or ever important. To be completely honest, the bulk of what I can remember as being attributable to the writers at that particular outlet is rage bait and political activism. You might say, oh well, that's just normal now, and I would be inclined to agree with that, but Polygon is maybe a step or two farther than most other outlets in the entire industry. That being said, their coverage of the newly released Mass Effect Legendary Edition, well, it's in a league of its own. Title, and this is the actual literal title, Mass Effect's revival reminds us it's time to abolish the space police. Yeah. Now, in a world where clickbait is rampant and attention spans are smaller than ever before, it's important to read beyond just the headlines, but in the interest of saving everyone time and brain cells, the title is actually accurate for once. This article takes aim at the fundamental premise behind Mass Effect 3, tags Shepard and his crew with various authoritarian labels, prescribes them to be some sort of galactic law enforcement, and laments the idea that this could ever be acceptable, fun, or tolerated. Here's a selection of paragraphs from the article, and I know it's going to be a lot, but this will establish just what kind of framing the author is going for when diving into the topic of space police. Quote, after the wave of protests last summer following the police killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, among others, the topic of defunding the police began to see more frequent and serious public discussion. Several city councils even introduced measures to reallocate police funds to social programs with vastly inferior budgets. Police corruption, which had previously been glossed over by reformist appeals to root out the few bad apples, was finally cracked wide open, revealing the racist structural rot underlying the entire institution. Maybe policing as a concept was bad. Maybe it couldn't be reformed, but should be abolished instead. The far-reaching fallout from these traumatic events and revelations wound up affecting the world of entertainment, notably including NBC's Brooklyn Nine-Nine, a show in the creative lineage of other workplace sitcoms like The Office and Parks and Recreation. Brooklyn Nine-Nine is about a fictional police precinct in Brooklyn, staffed by a young and diverse crew of wisecracking cops. Despite being a far cry from Oakley-stunting, tactical vest-wearing, thick-necked white male depictions of police, the characters on the show could not escape the reckoning sweeping through the media landscape. It became the subject of viral tweets and a Collider article asking the question of whether subsequent seasons of the show might not see the beloved cast transferred to an entirely different and depoliticized line of work, like becoming firefighters, post office workers, or even public school teachers. Continuing to a later section of the article, quote again, when they're not up to zany hijinks at the precinct, the officers of Brooklyn Nine-Nine are out solving crimes and catching criminals. This is pure fantasy, a fabricated depiction of what police actually do, which falls more along the lines of harassing the homeless and mentally ill, and profiling and frisking young black men. At its root, the show's purpose is to defend and uphold the myth that police are our guardians. It's a myth that contributes to the self-serving and convenient obfuscation that the police are concerned first and foremost with crime. End quote. Hopefully that sets the bar. Police corruption, racist structural rot under the entire institution. Maybe policing as a concept is bad. The myth that police solve crimes. They harass the homeless and mentally ill, etc., etc., etc. These are the framing mechanisms put forward by the author to emphasize their point that even in a gaming entertainment franchise, the entire fundamental premise of police should be completely abolished. And I know it's already completely absurd, right? But it gets even better. All right. Time to pay the bills and also promote a high quality product. Ridge wallets are amazing, and ever since I initially partnered with their company, I have used one with absolutely no intention of ever going back. I use them as gifts. I also got some extra designs and colors for myself, and I even tried to straight up break my initial wallet. I ran over it with my car. It was kind of a fun time. For science, of course, and it held up basically like a Spartan shield. Ridge is so confident in their product, they offer a free 30-day testing period where if you don't like it, you just send it back. There's room for 12 cards, they use high-strength industrial materials, and you can swap between a clip or a strap for cash and paper bills. Quality matters. It matters more and more, obviously, these days, actually. Like recently, it matters a great deal. And that's what Ridge is. High quality. Using the link down below, you can get 10% off and free worldwide shipping with code Upper Echelon. Again, that's code Upper Echelon, 10% off and free worldwide shipping when you use the link down below in the description. Big thank you to Ridge for sponsoring the channel and basically paying the bills. So how does it get better? Well, since the writer clearly establishes from the onset, the very beginning, that our view of this game and its police in their entirety should be dictated by real-world events and institutions, why don't we play by their set of rules? There is primarily one individual instance that becomes a citation here, and it's always easier to make a case if you have examples. And there's one thing that is ever even addressed when advocates begin screeching about abolition of law enforcement offices. Ignoring the idea that none of these activist groups even have a singular cohesive definition of what abolish means, because literary norms to them are basically an inconvenience, you will almost always hear about Camden, New Jersey. Camden, New Jersey is their bedrock, or at least it is for a great deal of people. Titles and articles like "The city that really did abolish the police" will get thrown around left and right as people use Camden to try and bludgeon their detractors on social media especially, but the entire thing is built on a lie. There is a very appealing chain of events that did occur in Camden, which make it extremely enticing when trying to advocate for total police abolition, but for anyone who actually knows any better, those who default to this example have already lost their ground to stand on completely. To summarize, and I'll link sources down below in the description, Camden, New Jersey saw an increase in crime preceding all of their decisions, and through a series of political maneuvers, they disbanded their own police force, laying off a large number of officers and deconstructing the union presence there as well. But those very same officers were put through a new screening process and rehired, most of them at least, into other departments. Immediately after, the Camden area was reformatted to be policed by different precincts and divisions across a broader area. And the ultimate effect was that Camden, New Jersey had more active police than before, simply from different areas, and the crime went down. This gives a perfect illusion of success for police abolition, because you can technically say that Camden police were abolished, and then crime went down afterwards, but for anyone who doesn't realize that police presence actually increased as a result of those policies, well, it's a stone-cold indicator of who is and is not an adequate voice on the topic. This might seem unrelated when we discuss space police and Polygon, but sadly it's not really true because Camden, New Jersey genuinely is one of the bedrock elements for a defensive argument in favor of abolishing police. Polygon is establishing that all police are bad, without fail, and that they should not only be abolished in reality, but also within entertainment. All the while, one of, if not the, most prominent examples used by activists everywhere, especially in America though, of why and how police abolition is effective and good, is based on a lie. See the problem? Well, that's not the end of it, because the article also takes a turn towards, I don't even really know what. Here's the quote. This dynamic plays out in the ways in which Shepard relates to the rest of their crewmates as well. When not serving as appendages to Shepard's will, Shepard's comrades will often bring their own personal dilemmas and problems to the table. Yet they usually rely on Shepard to make the final decisions about how to handle their issues. It is Shepard who has ultimate agency over how they live out their lives. They play defense attorney for a helpless Tali facing the accusations of her own people. They decide what happens to Thane's criminal son, Samara's criminal daughter, and Jacob's criminal dad, to stay on theme. End quote. This part blows my mind because obviously the player will have narrative authority over the choices in an RPG video game. The whole thing is reminiscent of a speech I once heard at GDC by Heather Alexandra, staff writer at Kotaku during that time frame, which called players tyrants, referring to in-game characters as real people, like, no, I mean that, real people, and highly emphasized that players are working against the rights and interests of digital personalities.
But we need to be careful because players are tyrants. I know we're supposed to say, like, players are the best and everything, but players scare the out of me. They control everything about video game worlds. They can make these people, and I mean it, these people do things that they do not want to do. The implications of that are very scary. I think video game characters want freedom, and thankfully there are places where they get it. Thankfully, yes. Cutscenes is one place where they actually get to act as, like, entities solely within their fictional world, by which I mean they just get to be people, and then idle animations where they finally get to express, just for a moment, a little autonomy. They are both actors, by which I mean that they are controllable persona manipulated by players, and they're characters, by which I mean individuals within a fiction, but also like people in a world, and we need to start treating them like actual people. Because they're being pulled in these two different directions, there's conflict though. What Raiden wants as a character in Metal Gear Solid 2 is incredibly different than what a player might want for Raiden. at any given time. And because video game characters are fulfilling two roles, it's a problem. Here's an example of that. On the left, there is a YouTuber who is making a compilation video of all the death animations in Resident Evil 2. The objective here for the actor is to die over and over. Claire Redfield's objective as a character is to live. These two things are not compatible. That's super screwed up. But good news, these two things can align. Solid Snake wants to sneak through a base, and he wants to complete his mission. The player wants to not get spotted and get the highest rank at the end of the game. Great. Things are in alignment.
These are delusions of moral crisis. Abolish the police, despite its lack of any real unified meaning, quite literally says that they want the institution to be torn down. However, the primary and almost the only example of this that will ever come up shows precisely the opposite, as police numbers were surged in the region, resulting in a criminal decline, which then gets used as a way to justify abolition. This activism is then spread far and wide, entering the world of digital entertainment products, where it is stated that a fictional universe must abolish the space police, and that the central themes of authoritarian control in that game result in a lack of freedom for the characters that are not controlled by the player, through decisions awarded to the player for the sake of an interactive entertainment product, which is oddly reminiscent of a game developer conference panel in which pixels are treated like people, and it is expressed that the player is an oppressive tyrant who unjustly controls the lives of the pixels. Let's tie the knot here on all of this. Real-world activism is being amplified more and more and more with the goal of taking what exists in reality and using that not as a blueprint, but as a framework for what can, and more importantly, cannot be shown, depicted, or discussed in games. Mass Effect is 14 years old and was only thrust back into the spotlight by a Legendary Edition release. This is a very old game. Despite that fact, it comes under fire as being oppressive and gets raked over the coals because activist policing agendas don't precisely align with what is displayed in a 2007 fictional sci-fi universe. Delusions of moral crisis. Pixels on a screen are not oppressed because a player decided to die for a montage. Characters in an RPG are not subjugated by the power of societal policing because the player is allowed to have agency over personalities that don't exist. Crime in a video game from 14 years ago does not have to be abolished because Flavor of the Month activism points towards that particular law enforcement institution as evil at this particular point in time. You cannot take shifts in culture and discourse, which happen routinely all the time, and then retroactively apply all of them to everything that existed before that. Modern activists have this twisted idea that what they think right now is how everything should be, now, forever, and all throughout history. A singular snapshot in time, fickle emotional responses, and an activist cause that half the time makes no fucking sense at all, should not be enforced against anything you can find which deviates from that fleeting perspective all throughout history or into the future. It's not new, it's not going anywhere, probably, but it's completely absurd. That's it. If you want to support, there are links down below, primarily Odyssey. It's a YouTube platform alternative. Also Locals, $5 a month to support the channel further and get ad-free versions of all the videos. Ridge wallets, absolutely buy one, support the channel. Another gaming YouTuber to support, merch, social media, etc., but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.